All right.
So did you you wanted to talk about, well, let me start this over. Um, Today is Sunday, November the 5th. Yes, 2023. And we're having another episode of Mendel's Musings with Reverend Dr. Mendle Adams
It's
and
amusing.
and me, Vicki Adams Wernicke. Um, so, Dad, did you want to talk about the legislation that you were proposing when you were in the Indiana Legislature about trying to prevent child abuse? I remember I found a little blurb from a newspaper article when I was doing some searching on newspaper.com.
Hmm.
If I can pull that up. Let me see if I can pull
Oh,
up
that'd be cool. I didn't know you could do
the
that.
article and see if I can, let's see. When would have that been? That would have been
70.
Indianapolis Star.
Yeah, I think it was the Indianapolis paper that had it, or the Muncie paper.
I think it was, yeah, I'm pulling it up. It was definitely when you were in the legislature. Uh,
The 75.
is this Huh. Well, I just thoroughly enjoyed going through this, even for um, my work. I've been able to find just amazing articles about clients and clients' families that I never would have really known. Oh, that's about the Senate race. Huh. I wonder where that article. Well, it doesn't matter. We can still. So, did you find out any more information about it, or
I
remember?
I did some exploring, and
Here,
I've got like
go ahead.
three different uh, rabbit holes that were involved in that situation.
Why don't
The
you, before you do that, will you let me share the screen? You have to go down to share screen and say a participant can share screen or something. It's at the bottom of and it's usually lit up in green.
I got it.
Yeah. And just say participant can share screen.
It doesn't say that.
It doesn't? Oh,
Mm-mm.
because I'm
It
saying,
says screen, a whiteboard, shares sound,
nah. Oh, well.
optimized for vision, video clip.
It oh, well. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Uh, I'll embed the article when I do the recording, when I do the editing.
Maybe it's just that.
You did it. There you did it.
Was that it?
No, that's your screen. Here we go. I'm requesting you to let me do it. Did you see my request?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And I just approved it.
Okay. Why don't
So waiting for you to control. Vicky Wernicke is controlling your screen.
you why don't you
You're controlling it now.
I need to get out of your oh, it's letting me control your screen, but
Yeah.
that's not what I want to do.
You want me to take it off?
Yeah, because I wanted to just do my. Oh well, never mind. I just wanted to show the article. So anyway, so what is the, I'll read what little bit I've got here to put it in context. So
Okay.
the article from the Star Press, the Muncie, Indiana newspaper from January 29th, Peter's birthday, 1976. And the article headline is, "Yes Votes Rounded Up. Bill to Fight Child Abuse Carries in House." A controversial child abuse bill was passed by the Indiana House 54-45 Wednesday with a little help by Speaker Phil Bainbridge, Democrat Highland. The bill, authored by Dennis Avery, Democratic from Evansville, would consolidate existing child abuse related statutes and establish an agency in each county to deal with children and parents in case of alleged child abuse. The legislation provides new definitions of child abuse and neglect and establishes new reporting requirements. The legislation brought several House members to the front of the chamber to argue the merits of the bill, and after debate was closed, caused several more legislators to take the 1-minute privilege due to each to explain his vote. Representative Mendle Adams, Democrat Marion, who voiced support of the measure during consideration by the House Human Affairs Committee, did not speak directly to the bill Wednesday, but instead read a 4-page letter sent to him by an abuse victim who urged passage of the bill. Among others, speaking for the bill were Representative Daniel Huff, Republican of Indianapolis, a minister who related his contact with cases of child abuse. When the vote was called, the tally board showed not enough votes to pass the bill. Bainbridge, who generally doesn't vote on bills before the House, cast his ballot for the measure and granted Avery's request to call for all absent legislators to come to the chamber to vote. After each new yes vote was cast, Bainbridge would shut off the voting machine. The votes could not be changed. When it was apparent enough votes for passage were on the board, the speaker called for a count. The bill's proponents cheered as the 54 votes for passage were recorded. Only Representative Stanley Boyer, Republican, Indianapolis, did not vote. Among those voting for the bill were Representative Sam Reed, Republican of Muncie, Representative Jeff Espich, Republican of Yale, Representative John Blevins, Republican of Anderson, Representative John Coldren, Republican of Portland, and Adams voting no, and Adams. Voting no were Representative Leo Volsard, Democratic Muncie, Representative Thomas Coleman, Republican Newcastle, and Representative Michael Ballsball, Democratic of Marion.
I remember that day very well, and I remember when the speaker locked it, and he'd open it up. We'd give him a signal, okay, we got to vote. He'd open it up, and the person would vote, and then he'd close it right away. That's what he kept them from.
So what do you remember about the legislation that was
Controversial?
Yeah, it sounds like it was going to be a good thing, right?
We were on the side of the angels, Vicky. That was one of the rabbit holes we're going down, okay?
Yeah.
So the deal is that since the Constitution of the state of Indiana was drawn up in 1905 or 1906, since that time there had never been a rewriting of the child abuse legislation. So it was way past due. Now, as you said, this was like in 76.
Yeah.
And and there was a whole slew of articles that were in the news about children that had been abused by parents and about extended families, religious schools that had beat children, corporal punishment and so forth. Matter of fact, there was a pastor by the name of Greg Dixon who pastored the Baptist Temple in Indianapolis. And he was one of those Jerry Falwell guys before there was a Jerry Falwell. And he was really to the right. Well, he didn't like it because it gave it didn't outlaw corporal punishment, but it made restrictions on corporal punishment that were restricting it and said it had to be under very controlled circumstances. And he was against that. And he, during the time, he brought the little kids from his school that was one of those independent schools that that they formed so that they didn't have to integrate the schools, and they brought them with their little flags and packed the galleries against it. That was all going on, and Ballsball, he and I shared. It was a two-member district, which is really strange. The 25th district in Indiana had two people in the same district that served in the legislature. I don't know how in the world they did that.
Marion wasn't that big. I mean, how did?
No. Well, but and Ballsball was part and parcel from the extreme right wing of the Democratic Party in Marion, and I was from the left wing of the party in Marion, and Labor. Labor is what put it over for me to get elected.
Right.
So anyhow, there was a strong push on Dennis Avery, who was a colleague of mine, was chairing this bill, and I told him that I was for the bill and offered my help. Well, at about the same time that bill was coming down, as a deacon in the Methodist Church, my credentials had been put on hold while I was not pastoring, but I was still deacon. I got a letter from the bishop of northern Indiana. Now, he was a new man. I tried to run down what his name was, and I couldn't find his name. The Methodists did not respond to me, and I couldn't remember his name. But I got a letter from him. I've got.
Well, you froze. You froze a bit, Dad.
Got it somewhere in all these files I got here, probably, Vicki. You don't see it as a repressed attack, and I'm against it. And I was then.
Hang on just a second. You froze for a minute there. So I don't know if I caught everything that you said.
Yeah, it said I was unstable. I don't know what they meant by that.
How rude. You were saying that.
Go ahead.
You were saying that this bishop sent you a letter and then you froze. So I didn't hear anything else.
He sent me a letter asking me to try to prevent the pari-mutuel gambling bill from being passed in the House of Representatives.
Okay, I remember the pari-mutuel. I remember hearing about that, but that's.
And I wrote him a letter back in which I assured him that as a faithful Methodist and as a person that was a liberal Democrat, that I shared his views on the pari-mutuel bill, and that I intended to vote that way. But I said, I find, dear Bishop, that the Sermon on the Mount nor the Ten Commandments, neither Jesus nor Moses said anything against gambling. But they did tell us that we should protect children and the widows and orphans. And therefore, I'm asking you to use the considerable weight of your office to help us to pass this bill.
Wow, Dad.
Well, his administrative assistant was a fellow that I knew when I was pastoring for the Methodist Church. and it was his administrative assistant, and he called me and said, "Oh, Mendel, I'm so sorry, but it said Bishop so and so is now at the World Council of Churches meeting in Kenya, Africa, and so he can't be at the hearing." I said, "Well, I really feel this is important. Vicky, they flew him from Kenya to Indianapolis so he could speak, and we filled the chamber for an evening session. And then I got up and read a letter that was a 4-page letter that was written by a guy in my district whose name was Victor Mallory."
Oh, I remember Victor.
You remember Vic? Okay.
Yeah.
And Vic had written this letter to me about how he had been sexually abused by this preacher, uh, foster father that he had, and how terrible it was. And he was begging me to vote for this uh, codifying the against child abuse in the legislature. So that's the letter that I read. I just got up at the desk after I had argued, and I got up at the desk and I read that letter. And I didn't tell Victor's name. I've never said Victor's name connected with that until just now. I'm sure that he's gone on to glory now. Uh, but he that really solidified the vote. Now, before the vote was taken, however, I got Greg Dixon from the uh, Baptist Temple, Indianapolis Baptist Temple, sent a guy by the name of Paul Voronite to see me and take me out for a sandwich.
Uh-oh.
Paul Voronite had been at the Windfall Church when I was 20 years of age, and their pastor at Windfall, Indiana, before I'd gone to college or seminary, before I was involved in politics at all. Paul gave us anti-communist speech at the Windfall Church, and he had been at J.C. Williams, your grandfather, your mother's father, at his church in Winchester, Indiana. And J.C. said, "Mendel, you got to get this guy." And so I had him to come, and we packed the church out that night, and he gave a stem winder about how terrible communism was and how he was a refugee from the Soviet Union, and he put on quite a show. He contacted me while I was pastoring the Methodist Church after I left there and was going to college at Marion, Indiana. He contacted me and wanted to do one of his anti-communist things at the Methodist Church, at the Mount Comfort Church. And I did some investigation a little bit more, and I told him, I said, "Now you realize that the Methodist Church is a member of the World Council of Churches, and I know that you have been against the World Council of Churches and saw it as a communist front organization because people from the Russian Orthodox denomination were part of that conference." And I said, "So you would have to not say anything about that. We just couldn't have you do that." So he canceled on me. Okay, I'm in the legislature. Now when I had that conversation with him was in 58, around 60, maybe around 60.
Okay.
So I had that conversation with him at the Pilgrim Holiness Church. Here I am 23 years later. I'm in the state legislature. Paul Voronite from the past contacts me, take me out for a sandwich, bought me a cup of coffee and a little sandwich, and we had that. And he proceeded to tell me how the communists were out to control our families and our children and so forth, and we had to be careful about this, and that Dixon had sent him to do it. And I handed Paul that letter, and I said, "Paul, I want you to read this letter from my constituent." and then you tell me what I should do. He read, he read the letter and he said, Mendel, you got to do what God wants you to do. So I did. So it just, like I said, there was a couple of rabbit holes. There was a Paul Vorknife rabbit hole. There was the Vic Mallardy rabbit hole.
Gosh.
There was the bishop of the Methodist Church, that rabbit hole. All those things came together in this one memory that was piqued by you finding that article.
Isn't that
Now, later on that year, there was a thing that came out in the Muncie Star. You may be able to find this. The the Fraternal Order of Eagles had a school for incorrigible children
uh,
there in Muncie, just outside of Muncie. I think it was in Gaston, Indiana, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which was in my district. And the Muncie Star did a whole series of articles about the horrible abuse that was being done to kids there. And so uh, someone sent me a copy of that and said, Mendel, what are you going to do about this? This is your district. So I contacted the welfare office and I said, how much money are we giving them per year to operate the school? And they told me, I said, all right, I want us to tell them that unless they clean that act up, we're going to turn off the spigot and they won't get any money. So, so it just,
did it work? I mean, did you?
it grew from there.
So what
And
happened?
we actually had a hearing before the state legislature, and I said, and they said, Mendel, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to close that place down. They said, well, how can you do it? I said, well, I know that they might be able to sue me if I said this thing just off the cuff. But if I'm talking in the as a legislator, they can't sue me, and I'm going to pull out all the stops. And I did. I did the chapter and verse in the stuff that the Muncie Star had done their investigative report and so forth, and I chapter and versed it. And Vicky, the state welfare, cut them off. Wow, right away.
Okay,
So,
what was the name of the school? What was the name of the school?
well, it was it seems to me like it was on eagle's wings or something like that. It was done by the it was it was a thing that was done. I believe it was in Gaston, Indiana,
Okay.
and it was sponsored by um, uh, the lodge, the Eagles Lodge, um,
Okay.
the Fraternal Order of Eagles, and they've been running that. You know, they just had bad. They
That,
did anything against the lodge, but they had bad leadership, and they just doubled down and doubled down.
wow.
But we
So,
closed we
so,
closed it down.
so what happened with the bill that passed the House? Did the Senate pass it? I mean, did it become
The
law?
Senate did pass it, and it was signed into law by Otis R. Bowen, the Republican governor. Yep.
Wow.
But
That's
I felt, even though it was, quote, not my bill,
great.
it was Dennis Avery's bill, but I felt like I had a significant role in getting that done. At that time, the Methodist Church in Indiana was the largest Protestant church in Indiana.
Oh,
There were more Methodists in Indiana than there were Baptists at that point.
interesting.
Uh, that has changed considerably now, but
Right, right. Well, even Methodists aren't really Methodists like we knew them. I
oh,
re-
right,
I remember as a kid, there was, you were always having political discussions and people over, and sometimes I would kind of sit in the background and people wouldn't notice me, but I would hear stuff. And I remember discussions about corporal punishment. And
mm,
I think that's where I learned the word, what corporal punishment was and how, the like schools doing paddling, and I didn't know Vic's background, but I do remember Vic was very odd, and he was
Yes,
just very
yes. He was damaged. He was a damaged person, and
Del-
bless his heart, he was good-hearted as he could be. But
Dolores found him creepy, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
understand that. Yeah, but my heart broke for him because when he told me what had happened, I realized this was really a damaged man.
Mhm.
And I was amazed that he had kept it together as much as he had. He had wife and two kids, and he was a dynamo. I tell you, he was a good writer. He wrote a great letter. I wish I had a copy of that letter.
Did he write that letter because of the legislation, or just because of
Yes,
your friendship?
yes, he wrote it because of legislation,
Okay.
but he was a friend of mine
Yes.
in the political situation.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Wow. Isn't that amazing that one little article I found has
Yeah, yeah.
spread this,
and
this
and,
tension?
and it opened up a couple things. There's another little sidebar story, if you got room for it. I don't know if you will,
We got lots of room.
that that I feel quite proud of myself in doing. And uh, after I told you about my role in the pari-mutuel gambling thing.
Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah. Let's follow up on that.
All right, the pari-mutuel gambling thing was this way. The Republicans had always been against pari-mutuel gambling, but there was a Republican senator from down the southern part of the state that had horses.
Well,
And
maybe
for some,
explain what parimutuel betting is for those who don't know what that was.
oh, okay, well, it's like a lottery, but it's based upon who wins horse races, and you bet money on who's going to win, and then it pays off money for that. And it was sold. The idea was sold to people that instead of people paying taxes on what they bought or what they owned, that you would get these terrible sinners that were going to be gambling anyway, and you would tax them, and that money then would be used to support the state in its various wonderful things that the state did. Okay, I mean that's the way it's done. That is the way
And
that the legislatures uh, give that uh, as an understanding, a way to justify
yeah,
parimutuel gambling.
so and parimutuel was just horse racing, right? Being allowed
Yes,
to
there
gamble.
was there was no casinos. They weren't allowed to do bingo. The bingo things that were done at the senior citizens meetings were all illegal. The bingo that was done in the Catholic churches were actually illegal, but they winked and nodded and let it go anyhow. And so they could be against gambling, but if they want to, our old people want to play bingo, we'll let them play bingo. And who's going to say anything about it? It's against the law, but nobody's going to do it.
So okay, so
So,
there's the Republicans are now pushing for this because it's a way of getting taxes without taxing people.
without taxing, so they didn't have to say we're raising taxes, but we're raising taxes. Okay,
Right.
now they told us when they oriented us to the House of Representatives. They explained to us that the Constitution of the state of Indiana, like the Constitution of the United States, says that all bills that have to do with raising revenue, that raises taxes or raises revenue, must begin in the House of Representatives.
Right.
It has to be a House bill. Then that House bill is passed on to the Senate for them to relay, and then it has to come back, and they have to come to odds, but the House has to generate all bills that raise revenue. That's just the way it is.
Right.
That's the same way it is, and that's one of the things that is so hard for people to understand concerning the United States government, because it's set up exactly the same way. The the House Ways and Means, and I was on the House Ways and Means. Okay,
Yeah.
that was one of my committees. So they tried to pass it, and they finally, because this guy was in the state senate, and he was such a powerful guy. He was second in command over there or something, and he had a lot of money, and he got them to vote for it. Well, they could vote for it because it wasn't going to come pass anyhow, because it was in the wrong house, right? But they passed it in the Senate and then sent it over to the House. And at the House, um, it came up to a bid. We had to vote on the Senate bill on whether or not to have parimutuel gambling.
It didn't come
So
up.
I waited until the last hearing before I spoke on it.
Okay.
And I went to the floor. Now the speaker and the speaker pro tem and all the leadership of the Democratic Party was always for gambling. And then the Republicans, they had a significant number of them that were for it, so it was greased. It was going to go through.
Mhm.
And so I went to the floor and I asked the Speaker pro tem. I said, Representative Campbell, I said, I'd like to discuss this with you. I said, explain to me something. I'm confused. Uh, will this bill help in any way to raise any funds to educate our children? Well, yes, Representative Adams, they would do that. Mm-hmm. I said, how much? Oh, I can't say that. I said, okay, you just give me a figure. Will it be $1 million? Well, I can't say that, Representative Adams. Will it be $10,000? I can't say that, Representative Adams. Why you ask me this silly question? I said, will it raise $1? Well, of course it will. And I said, permission to speak on this bill. And he says, was that all you wanted to know from me? I said, yes, you answered me. And so I spoke to the constitutional issue about how it had started in the wrong house. And it doesn't make any difference who votes for this and who doesn't vote for it. It will not become the law of Indiana this time around. And Gene Polisinski, who was the Cub reporter at that time from the Marion newspaper,
Uh-huh.
came up to me afterwards and said, how did you know that? You're not a lawyer. And I said, well, I can read, for crying out loud. You don't have to be a lawyer to know how to read. And they checked it out, and the Republican Attorney General came out and said Representative Adams is absolutely correct. So that slowed it down for 2 more years until they got it started in the right house. Now they've got open gambling, they've got casinos, and they've got the lottery, and they've got everything there. But but at that particular point in time, I just said, you can't do it. And then that's the way I did it. I finally got it down. I said to Greg, will it raise $1? Just $1. Tell me if it will raise $1. He said, well, Representative Adams, it'll raise $1. I said, that's all I need to hear from you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, Dad. I didn't know those details. I remember you talking about the parimutuel betting and how you didn't like it, and there was a tax on the poor. That, like you talk about, the lottery and everything. And that is
I
a brilliant.
I suggested an amendment that said that all the earnings of persons making $100,000 or more would be taxed 100%, because they were just saying it wasn't a tax on the poor, it was a tax on everybody. And I said, okay, well, let's just, since you're having so much fun doing that, we'll just make it so if you make $100,000, you can't win anything. Oh, that didn't go over too good.
I bet. So did you you just from from the orientation you had
Uh-huh.
as a freshman representative, that's where you learned that, right? That
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And I carried a copy of that with me everywhere I went.
so it's like
I carried.
the other legislatures like forgot that basic training that they had.
They
And
didn't think it made any difference because they had the votes. See,
right, right,
they didn't think that the process had any difference. Well, the process does matter. It
absolutely.
does matter, and that's how now when I try to explain to people about what's going on nationally, and you just say, well, that's what's going on nationally. That's why it
Yeah,
doesn't make any difference what Schumer does.
that's right.
The the House of Representatives has to take care of the fiscal stuff. That has to start in the House of Representatives.
Right. That's why, whoever the Speaker of the House is very important. And
Yeah,
that's why when there wasn't a Speaker of the House for so long, it was very damaging. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
wow, that.
so anyhow, I learned a lot about governance in those couple years I was there. Gene Policinski, by the way, went on. He was one of the persons that was a founder of USA Today in
Oh,
your mother and I, when your mother was working in D.C. with now. Uh, we went and sat down with him before they had actually published their first copy of that, and we met with him at some fancy restaurant there, and met with him. And now that he's retired, he's the last I heard from him, he was living at Vanderbilt University and was head of the First Amendment foundation down there.
oh,
And I
was that?
talked with him. He wrote an article that was published somewhere, and I saw it, and I sent him an email, and he sent back and said, "Oh, Mendel, that was so long ago." And he told me that he would stop by and see Ruth and I when he came to Cincinnati, but he never did.
Was
And
he I still haven't, I still want to find, and the Marion paper, they only go back to like 1990. So like
yeah,
during the campaign, the Marion paper's out there, and I want to find the newspaper for the day after the election where I was
boy,
on that page.
that was in full color.
Yeah.
Um, uh, they, I think the night newspaper chain took them over.
I need to call and see if I can get them to pull it from the archives for me, because I think that would be kind of cool to get. I remember you and Mom being so angry when the paper came out and my picture was on there, and he was making it sound like I was crying, and no, I was tired. I was resting.
Worn out, for crying out loud. But it would have been all right for you to cry, for crying out loud
I
too.
mean, I was 12 too, and I got my picture on the front of the paper. I thought it was great. You and Mom were like, "Oh, this is horrible. This is horrible." And I'm like, I
I felt like I felt like crying at the time.
Oh yes, I bet you did. Well, I think I did. I think I did cry because I knew what it meant when you
Yeah,
lost. But at that time, because the picture was taken like after midnight or something. And
yeah.
anyway,
So
well,
anyhow, well, that's the saga of child abuse legislation, and, and how that fit with parimutuel gambling. And so,
that is something. That is, well, the bishop kind of took what you said to heart for sending all those people and coming to testify. So
He came from Kenya, Africa. He came so he could speak at that gathering.
do you remember what he spoke, what he brought to the table about the bill, or just that it
He
was?
came down to it was done in the chamber, and I had sent him a copy of the bill, but he came to the chamber and came right down and spoke from the podium.
Oh, so it wasn't
Oh Lordy, he
a
did.
hearing. It was, oh,
It
fascinating.
was at night, so it wasn't during the regular session, but it was during a committee session. See,
Oh, fascinating.
and Dennis Avery was chairing it, and I said, Dennis, I can get him to come.
Oh, Dad, that is cool. That is very
So
cool.
you play the cards you can, you know.
Exactly, exactly. Well, you were only there for 2 years in the legislature, but you did some mighty important work in the short time you were there.
I had fun anyhow.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.